Welcome back to eSIM Studios. My name is Taylor Bell. I put out a video yesterday in regards to the report that Samsung was on a mission to eliminate chipset thermal throttling as it was planning to take a key feature from the Red Magic gaming smartphone, putting the liquid cooling technology inside future Samsung Galaxy flagship smartphones, probably the S28, S29 series. Samsung is wanting to move the entire lineup to Exynos chips. We all know they get hot. Now, their new technology, the new Exynos chips, are really good when they run cool. Problem is, when they get ramped up and really start to impress, that's when the heat starts to build up and thermal throttling kicks in and ramps down that CPU, and you just can't get enough power out of that CPU, and which is why they want to implement liquid cooling. Now, I've always said leaks come out for a reason, and here is a perfect example. As that report is coming out that Samsung is trying to implement their own Exynos CPUs into their devices, Qualcomm said, not so fast. So there's a new report today saying that Qualcomm is poised for an increased Snapdragon share in future Samsung Galaxy devices due to Samsung's strategy. So, despite Samsung's initial plans to use Exynos 2700 CPU in at least half of the S27 shipments, this new report suggests Qualcomm may secure a larger share. So, this shift is attributed to potential costlier productions of the Samsung Exynos 2700 CPU, which utilizes Samsung's second generation 2 nanometer GAA process compared to TSMC's superior 2 nanometer architecture used for the upcoming Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 6. So Qualcomm has planned for this, and obviously Qualcomm wants Samsung to use their Snapdragon CPUs for as long as possible. They don't want to give up one of their absolute biggest customers because let's face it, Samsung probably is Qualcomm's number one consumer. Look, I don't have the stats, but I mean, off the top of my head, they probably are. They put them in millions and millions of smartphones. So Qualcomm's not going to let Samsung just kick them to the curb. Now, Qualcomm does have an advantage, and as I mentioned, they plan for this. So remember a few weeks ago, the report came out that with this new upcoming Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 6 series CPU, they're gonna put out two variants similar to how they did this year with the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5 and the Snapdragon 8 Gen 5. So this upcoming year, they're going to have a base model and a Pro model, changing names again. Thanks a lot, Qualcomm. And they're going to use that to their advantage to essentially force Samsung to use their CPUs in more devices than Samsung wants, quite frankly. Now, this is nobody's fault but Samsung. Qualcomm is actually very strategic in how they're maneuvering the future road. Because look, Samsung wants to move to Exynos, just like Google's moved to Tensor, just like Apple has moved to their Bionic chips, just like Xiaomi is moving to their own CPU here in the next year or two. It's getting very expensive for Samsung to produce this Exynos 2700 CPU. And that's the entire reason of Qualcomm splitting the two flagship CPUs. So the Pro model, the 8 Elite Gen 6 Pro, will be the top notch, very cream of the crop flagship CPU. They're going to put that essentially in the S27 Ultra and S27 Pro. Now, this is where it gets interesting because Samsung was anticipating for the base S27 and for the S27 Plus, they were planning on putting the Exynos 2700. However, Qualcomm, their Snapdragon 8 Gen 6, not the Pro, but the Gen 6, is actually cheaper. They priced it under what it cost Samsung to produce the Exynos 2700. We all know the Samsung mobile department is not doing great financially, and essentially Qualcomm is going to strong arm, make it a no-brainer for Samsung to essentially be forced to use the cheaper option, that cheaper CPU, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 6 in the base S27 and S27 Plus, because it's cheaper for Samsung to use. Now, when you're selling millions upon millions upon millions of smartphones, just a 1 cent price difference can equate to an enormous amount of money saved. Now, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 6 is not going to be 1 cent cheaper than the Exynos 2700. Realistically, it's probably going to be, I'm just throwing a number out there, my best guess is probably $20 to $30 cheaper per CPU, per device. But when you equate that to selling millions upon millions upon millions of smartphones, it's a no-brainer for Samsung to choose the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 6 because it'll essentially save them hundreds of millions of dollars. See what I'm saying? So I think Qualcomm has played this fantastically. Like, I bet people at Samsung are kicking themselves because they just can't get this Exynos thing right. And even when they do have a good chip, it runs, as I mentioned, really good when it's cool. But when it starts ramping up and heat gets up there, that's when it starts scaling down and you lose performance. So this upcoming year for this S27 series is going to be very interesting. I don't honestly know how they're going to navigate this, being Samsung and Samsung shoes, because as I mentioned, Qualcomm's going to essentially force them to use the, I don't even know what you call it, the lower class flagship chip. We all know they're going to put the very best in the Ultra and the upcoming Pro, but it gets interesting when you look at the lower level at the S27 and S27 Plus. I think they're going to have to go with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 6 and then put the Pro variants in the Ultra and Pro models. But what does that leave Samsung? What does that leave Samsung with their Exynos CPUs? Is it just a lost cause? Are they really going to have to put liquid cooling in these devices? Now, as I mentioned yesterday on my video, I can see them putting liquid cooling in the Pro and the Ultra model because, look, this is not cheap. For them to add a liquid cooling system into these devices, it's going to raise the price. How much? I don't know, but it's going to raise the price. Now, it wouldn't even make sense to put liquid cooling in a Snapdragon variant when it doesn't need liquid cooling. They would only put liquid cooling in the models that have the Exynos CPU. So if they were planning on putting the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 6 Pro in the Ultra and Pro models, well, the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 6 Pro doesn't need liquid cooling. So is Samsung going to put the Exynos CPU in the base model and the Plus model with the Exynos and liquid cooling? Because then that's going to increase the price for Samsung, which in turn would increase the price on us, the consumer, which in turn would turn some people away from the device because they're going to be more expensive. So I'm not really sure what Samsung is doing. It looks like Qualcomm has Samsung right where they want them. To be honest with you, I'm a fan of Qualcomm. I love Snapdragon chips. I've used them in a lot of my devices. I'm a member of their Qualcomm developer program. I like Qualcomm, so that's happy. I mean, that's fine with me. It's just kind of embarrassing for Samsung because I thought that was weird. Actually, I thought it was kind of cool yesterday. Like, oh, cool, liquid cooling in some of these phones. It's going to run really cool. This report comes out today and the light bulb goes off oh crap, Qualcomm's playing this to the T. I mean, they're essentially, as I mentioned, strong arming Samsung into using their product. Samsung cannot leave Qualcomm. Samsung would love to kick Qualcomm to the curb, save some money, but Qualcomm is, as I mentioned, producing the lower level flagship CPU at a cheaper price than what Samsung can manufacture their own product for. Like, that is brilliant. So they're essentially telling Samsung, well, we make a better product and it's cheaper. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? If you're Samsung, you have no choice. No choice but to use Qualcomm. They might as well just give this whole Exynos chip thing up, because the way it's going, it's not going good. They continually, as of last year, I thought they were on the right track. Some leaked information I've seen, some behind the scenes stuff. It looked like they have the manufacturing process down. That's even a stretch, okay? Because it's certainly not on TSMC's level. Let's just put that out there. And Intel, it looks like they're right on par with manufacturing. Looks like they got something. But with this new Samsung's new GAA process, it looks like they have something. But here's the kick. But what are they going to do with it? And it appears they have an overheating issue. And as I mentioned, they've been overheating forever. So I finally thought with this new GAA packing process, this new manufacturing process, they would actually get over this heat buildup, and they've implemented this heat pass block technology where they pack it differently than before. But if that was the case, if they had that figured out, why would they be moving to liquid cooling? You see what I'm saying? You're not going to move to liquid cooling CPUs if you have the packing process, the manufacturing process down. So that story yesterday, now that I sit on it, now that I get this news today about Qualcomm, it looks like Samsung might be back at square one. Like, they might as well just scrap this whole thing. They've spent decades trying to perfect it. And look, for all the shitty Exynos CPUs they've produced, they've had one, maybe two good Exynos CPUs, but that's been 8 years ago. Like, where we're moving forward, Qualcomm's absolutely nailing it on CPUs lately. They just have a superior product, and it's so superior that their number one customer can't say no. They absolutely cannot say no. They absolutely cannot move forward with essentially transferring to their own product. So it doesn't look like Samsung and Qualcomm are going to split anytime soon, because it's pretty embarrassing what's happening with Exynos. And at what point do you just throw your hands up and say, well, looks like we're going to be married to Qualcomm for a while. Now, the reason why Samsung wants to leave Qualcomm, not only because they want to have their own product and you have more control, more say-so if you manufacture your own device and your own CPU, but it comes down to cost. When they started this new GAA packing process, Samsung, for their Exynos CPUs, the whole point of it was twofold. As I mentioned, have your own CPU, have your own phone, have more control over what you do with that. And on the flip side is cost. It theoretically, it should be cheaper. Theoretically, you should save your company an endless amount of money moving into the future using your own product. And especially Samsung's case, they're not just using their own CPU technology, they actually manufacture it as well, because Apple and Google, they design their CPU, the architecture, and then they send those schematics to TSMC. TSMC builds it, manufactures it, and then ships them back to Apple or Google, and then they put them into phones, right? Samsung is in a unique spot where they not only design the CPU, but they also manufacture it, put it together. So they're not sending it to TSMC. Maybe Samsung needs to ditch the packing process. Maybe they need to do what Google and Apple do, which is design the CPU and then send it to TSMC for packing, for manufacturing. I don't know. Maybe that's an option. Maybe that's something they've thought of. I'm sure it's something they've thought of already. But at what point do they throw their hands up and get out of the packing process, because they've spent billions upon billions of dollars trying to get this manufacturing process on point, and it's just not hitting. It's every year it's the same old story with Samsung and their Exynos CPUs. So I don't know where they go from here. I guess we shall see. Stay tuned to the channel. I'm going to keep everybody up to date with kind of what's going on behind the scenes, because it does impact the future of smartphone users, smartphones themselves. It has a major impact on what we're doing with these phones, how you interact with the device. Are they getting hot? Are they badass? Or are they fast? Do they suck? Do they overheat? This has a major play in the future smartphone world. So it is important. It is important to kind of understand some of the behind the scenes stuff. And look, I can only give you so much information because I'm not in the boardroom meetings, I'm not in R&D, but with some of the little leaks and news coming out, I try to educate and or inform people of what's going on, because it is important. But my hat's off to Qualcomm. Y'all played this freaking fantastic. Like, I'm giddy for Qualcomm. Like, I'm like, wow, I see what y'all were doing. Very smart, very smart. It actually gets me excited for Qualcomm, because this is a play that I'm sure they drew up in the boardroom meetings, and I'm sure it was a long-term play, and it looks like it's finally coming to fruition. Now, how far do we go from here? It looks like Samsung is going to be locked into Qualcomm for probably the next 2 years. But look, Qualcomm we'll get out of here on this. It looks like Qualcomm, as I've mentioned before, their future is uncertain, because Apple is designing their own CPUs, Google's designing their own CPUs, Xiaomi designing their own CPUs. So what does that leave Qualcomm? Qualcomm does not have a phone. They're just the supplier of the processor. So if Samsung moves to Exynos, what the hell's Qualcomm going to do? Now, they'll still sell CPUs. I mean, Oppo, which, probably use their CPUs. Motorola probably use Qualcomm CPUs. But if you lose a major customer like Samsung, that's a enormous chunk of revenue out the door. So I think, as I mentioned, they're doing a great job of making Samsung use their product. And I'm sure, look, they have long-term goals, a long-term strategy. So I'm probably not the one to say. I'm just guessing. But they've moved into the AI space. They're starting to do data center servers, processors, GPUs now, which is a big money maker. They're in the car industry, making ECUs for vehicles, AI stuff in these new future cars. So I think they're, spreading their tentacles a little bit in outside of the phone world, just to continue getting good revenue coming in different aspects in different industries. But it looks like for the short-term future, they're going to be good, at least especially with the Samsung news. But long-term, as I mentioned, Samsung might just want to throw in the towel and throw their hands up with the CPU thing, or make major changes. As I mentioned, maybe just send it to TSMC, but that might not even be a possibility, because TSMC is completely packed for the next couple of years. They're at 100% capacity, so it's not like TSMC has room to just bring on Samsung Exynos chips. Maybe they'll reach out to Intel. I don't know, but that's another story for another day down the road. But my hat's off to Qualcomm. Good job, brother. Good job. I'll see y'all later. Peace.
Yeah. Woo.
I just need my space right now.
Fresh off the G5 jet, I'm on my way to a brand new kit.